Hey everybody. Can't tell if Facebook has changed things up if we're live and happy or if it's still starting. Well, Arrow's helping me test it too. All right, I think we're live now. Facebook changed it up. Arrow is assisting me today, so I apologize for his interaction with us. He knows that what we're talking about is really important, and that is contracts and deadlines and duties that you've got an 11-page document here that you're sending to a seller and saying, hey, we want to buy your house and we're going to do XYZ. And the seller's like, okay, we like what you're saying, and we have duties too, and they're all spelled out in here. It's also spelled out what happens if somebody fails in what they're saying to do. So it causes a lot of problems in real estate, and I just want to kind of address it. The federal government revised lending back in October of 15. It's something called TRID. And our government, being our government, decided that they weren't going to have any lenders, any realtors, or any title people helping with that revision. And they were doing some good things. They were trying to make it more transparent. So some of the deadlines that we have written into our document are actually federal guidelines that you're going to find everywhere. And some of them are Tennessee, and some of them are specifically between that buyer and that seller. So one of the first ones is the loan obligation. This comes straight from that TRID forget it. You'll know what I'm trying to say. So within 3 days of binding agreement date, and let me real quick say, binding agreement date is the date that the last party to present an offer or a counter has been told that that has been accepted. So my buyers send over to your sellers, we want to buy this house, and your sellers say, hey, everything looks great except we're countering this one item right here. Send it back to us, and we say, okay, that looks good to us. Then it gets back to the seller, and they know that their last offer has been accepted. That's when binding agreement date starts. That's the clock start for the things on our contract. And it starts the day after. So if I bound two contracts today, a buying and a selling. So today is binding agreement date. So the clock for tomorrow is 1, 2, and 3. So today's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So by Friday, my buyers have to have made application for a loan and pay for a credit report and notify the seller or the seller's representative having done that. And I've already done that because I already talked to you about pre-approvals, and I send in a pre-approval letter where they've fully underwritten when we do. But by 14 days after binding agreement date, you have to have chosen what home insurance you've gotten. You need to have ordered and paid for appraisal, and you have to show your lender that you have the ability with proof of funds to move forward on the contract. And you have to send notification to the seller or the seller's agent. Seller if it's a for sale by owner, seller's agent if it's a represented. And the reason you have to do the homeowner's insurance is it's calculated in your mortgage payment. So let's say that you're buying in one of the rural areas in Tennessee and it's a volunteer fire department and it's windy, curvy roads. That homeowner's insurance is going to be more expensive than my homeowner's insurance where I have a fire hydrant in my yard. So sometimes, if you're really close on what your mortgage payment debt to income ratio allows, if that insurance is really high, then you may not be in line, and that makes you under finance fail to be able to perform your contract. So they don't want the seller to have to wait any more than 14 days to have that number. You don't have to tell them, you don't have to pot the policy, but you have to know who you're going with and that it's within your ratios. So that's another buyer's obligation. Then we're going to go into seller's obligation a little different time because I think we'll be too long on this. Um, it talks about who's going to hold trust money and how it's going to be delivered. And fun fact, in Tennessee, it doesn't have to be money. It can be an item of worth. Although finding someone who will hold the item of worth for you, either a title company or a broker, makes that really difficult to do. So I don't advise trying that. I've had that situation in the past. So then also they say, okay, we're going to get you that trust money within 3 days of binding agreement date or 5 days of binding agreement date. If that date falls on the weekend, you better have it there too. Okay. Some of these things shuffle when they're on a weekend and a holiday, some don't. So if the buyer doesn't get that trust money, to the holder of the trust money in time. Then what happens? Well, the seller has the right to terminate the agreement after delivering to the buyer's representative in notice the failure to have delivered the trust money, and one day being given to get that to them. If the buyer gets that to them in that time, contract moves forward. If the seller's agent doesn't do that and it comes in at day 10 and the seller has never demanded for trust, then the contracts, they've waived their rights to do that. Then it discusses closing day and when possession is going to be. These are all things that if you guys want to know more about them, we can go into those in detail. Then it comes up on title and conveyance that the seller is saying, yeah, I'm going to give you a clear title on this house. Maybe you had contracting work done on your house and you got yanked off with the contractor and you said, I'm not paying you because you didn't do it or you didn't do it right or whatever. And they put a mechanics lien on your house. That house does not have clear title because they've got a lien on it for, however many dollars that you didn't pay that person. So then you also have inspections. And this is written in bold in a number of sections of the inspection part. So the buyer has a right to make inspections, not just general inspections, but it's septic inspections and termite inspections and surveys. I mean, there's like a whole different, like there's a whole list of these, okay? But usually in our area, it's 10 days. Sometimes it's 7, sometimes it's 14. Buyer chooses what they're going to do. Think about holidays and all of that. And then that's the inspection period. And then you have a resolution period. So if you have 10 days on the inspection, by the 10th day after binding agreement date, by midnight, your agent has to give to the seller's agent one of the three. Hey, this house is great. We don't want you to do anything in written notification. Or inspection scared us. We don't even want to negotiate. You don't have to tell the seller why you're out. You're just out, and you have to send written notification that you are withdrawing under inspection and then a mutual release of trust money and termination of contract. Or the third option, which happens more often, hey, you know what? That electrical outlet in the kitchen doesn't work and we need that fixed. And the front door latch doesn't line up right. That needs fixed. Can't ask for cosmetic. It can be safety and function, okay? So then once you submit that proposal, let's say you have 10 days to do this. On day 7, you send that proposal. And then you've got 5-day resolution period. That's back and forth. The seller says, nah, we're not going to fix the receptacle. You're on your own on that. We'll fix this. And the buyer's like, no, I really need you to fix the receptacle, but forget about the front door because we're going to change the locks and we're going to change the door anyway. So you negotiate it back and forth, but it's still a proposal. You have to get it into a written amendment. Hey guys, to bind in the contract before midnight on the day of the end of the resolution period. So again, using the examples of 10 and 5, if on day 7 you send over your proposal of what you want done, day 8 they come back, it's not day 8. It restarts under this resolution clock. So it's really day 1 of resolution. They come back and they're like, we're not going to do this. As long as by day 5 you've gotten an amendment in that says we're going to do X, Y, and Z, we're going to do them within X many days of closing, and everybody has signed off on that, then you're good. You can also do an in lieu of, like there's a cracked tile in the bathroom, or there's a wax ring that needs replaced on the toilet, and the buyers want the sellers to do that, but the buyers are going to redo that bathroom anyway, and they're like, you know what? Instead of replacing the toilet and the tile and all of that stuff, just take $1,000 off or give us $1,000 in closing costs. So it says in the contract, if you miss that deadline, if you don't send anything within that inspection period, in bold it says, in the event the buyer fails to make such timely inspections and respond within the time frame as herein described, the buyer forfeits any rights provided under this section 7, which is the inspection section, and in such case shall accept the property incurring as is condition except for normal wear and tear. So what happens if you're buying a house that's on septic and the septic inspector can't get out there because he's booked up, and you've got a 10-day period, and when you had your inspection on day 5, the inspector's like, you know what, you might want to get a septic inspector out here because I'm not sure if you have a problem. So you call the septic inspector and they can't get out there for another week. Well, you're past your 10 days. What your agent does, the buyer's agent, is do an amendment, ask the seller, hey, can we do an amendment to extend this 10 days into 2 weeks so that we have time? We don't want to break contract, but we want to know what's going on. Okay. All parties have to agree to it. And then it extends it from 10 days to 14 or whatever y'all decide. The other option that you can do is if the seller's like, hey, we're not going to extend it, which is really rare. Usually they're going to be like, yeah, we don't want to break contract and come back on the market either. Is you can say, okay, because you don't want to extend it, then you need to provide proof from a qualified septic inspector that there's truly nothing wrong with the septic. And if there is something wrong with this septic, that you will have it corrected, I would say 5 or 7 days before close, and that the buyer has the right to have that re-inspected by a professional septic inspector. So you've extended that time, you've stayed within your contract, and you're able to do, and you're not having to take a house as is, and you're not necessarily having to break contract on a house that you truly like. So that's the bit about the inspections. And then let's see what else y'all are agreeing to when you're buying a house. Talks about a bunch of disclosures that the seller has to make. I'm going to make those, I'll talk about those at a different time. Then down here at the very back, last part of the contract, right here, you can't see it probably, but it's lines 470 through 477. It's a place called special stipulation. Anything that's written in there supersedes the section of the contract that it refers to. And so let's say right now I've got a house that they have to sell their current house in order to buy their new house. So they're contingent on sale. So we wrote in a special stipulation about that. I always in mind have special stipulation that all parties are to close by 11:30 so we can fund that day. So I've said that it's on your agent, who literally means working on your behalf, to make sure that you're aware of these things that you're writing into the contract and what they mean, what your obligations are, and then also to help you meet your obligations. Now, hand in hand with that, if your agent's trying to help you meet your deadlines, you need to be listening to your agent too, because they're trying to keep you out of trouble. So this is what I do for my buyers. This is an email. It says, congratulations, you're under contract on, and I put whatever the date of or the address of the home is. A signed and bound copy is attached for you. And here's some dates you need to know. The binding agreement date is, and it's in red. 3 days after binding agreement date is, and it's in red. 14 days after binding agreement date is, and it's in red. Trust money is due on XYZ, and that date's in red. Inspection deadline is on blah, 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 and that's in red. And then it says, here's your next steps, and there's 1 through 8 of them. Trust money is due here. Approval letter is due here, and it's usually always marked completed. Notification of date of application of lender, that's that 3 days. And it says, you're going to work with your lender on this. You're going to work with me on this. I'm going to work with the lender on this. Order and pay for appraisal. You will work with your lender on this. Choose your insurance. You're going to provide this. By the way, I'm going to give you 2 to 3 potential agents that you can check with. Use them, don't use them, check with whoever you want, but I'm going to give you some options. Your inspection deadline is XYZ date. By the way, this house is on a septic. I am always going to tell you that you want to consider a septic inspection. And if you choose not to, I'm going to have you initial. Jennifer told me to do this and I didn't want to, so that I've covered my butt. So, and then there'll be some inspector options. And then there's going to be some survey options if you talked about needing to have a survey. And then there's going to be some termite options and anything else. Like if we're walking through the house and we see that the floors are a little uneven or there's a crack and you're like, I don't know about that. I'm like, well, then on the day of your inspection, have an engineer come down here too. Or if you're like, you know what, that bathroom, I'm just not going to be functional in there. And so on the inspection, let's also have someone come down and do a quote for how much we want to do the repairs on, so that we know kind of what we're getting into. So that's my little bits about inspections and deadlines and how to keep yourself from defaulting on a contract and getting into difficulty either in losing your trust money or buying a house as is that really needed repairs. If you're working with me, it's usually going to be a 10-day with a 5-day resolution period. And I'm going to beg you to please get your inspection scheduled by day 5 or 7, so that if we need to have a specialty inspection come up that we don't know about, we have time to do it. And we're not sending something to the seller at the last minute and having it not get to them in time. So Shout at me if you need me. And next week we'll be talking about something new and fun. Take care until we do. Jennifer Weissman with Benchmark.